that were needed for hardworking families in Texas, and I thank you for that. Thank you. I want to tell you, even without a title, Susan Hayes was in my office on a regular basis up there at the Capitol doing the hard work that was necessary for hardworking families, and it wasn't just a given. She was actually there doing the hard work, and now that I see her running and putting in the hard work, it's time for us to make sure that we vote people in like Susan Hayes. So a big round of applause for her. Let me tell you, I'm an attorney during the day, but for the last 35 years, we have had a family business back home in Eagle Pass, and I'm very proud of it. It's a tortilla factory that when I was 12 years old, my parents had the opportunity to buy with a little bit of seed money, and at that time it cost $65,000, which my parents thought it was going to take forever to pay off. And let me tell you, that one decision that they made changed the life for people like my sister and myself and for my family, as well as for my parents. And that is the same type of opportunity that I want to create for individuals and hardworking families in the state of Texas. And I think that the state has lost sight of that. And it has decided to represent the best interests of a certain few instead of the hardworking families that are here and all over the state of Texas. And we need to change that. Okay? That's right. Lastly, all of this could not be possible without the help of my beautiful wife, Helen Chase. For her undying support, her ability to get me off my feet when I'm tired, and we've been doing it for about 8 hours, and she's been driving the entire district. Let me tell you, we represent the largest district in the state of Texas. It starts in Maverick County and goes all the way down to the northeast portion of El Paso. Over 750 miles of a shared border with Mexico. 9 out of the 14 counties that I represent share a border with Mexico. I've become the border guy. And I've embraced it. Because it is time to send the right message about what we are seeing on the border and how we can secure our border and how we can do it the right way, the legal way, as Beto has pushed, because we don't want to listen to those detractors that keep talking about how Beto's for open borders. That is not the case, and we need to set the record straight, and these forums provide that opportunity for Beto. Now, let me talk about a little bit. When we decided to run, I'd never run for office before. And I'm sorry we didn't know that. But I am not allowed to keep twirling on this thing. I must stay fixed as much as possible. Now, when we started, he had already run and had visited the entire state of Texas, every one of the counties. And if he did 254, Helen and I thought we could definitely do 12 counties that we represent back in 2019. Right? It was through his hard work ethic that we took a page from that book and decided we will visit, and we did this in mid-November where we announced, and we did it before the end of the year where we visited all 12 counties and made it a point to share our vision with every one of the counties. Because regardless of whether that county was red or blue, if I won, I was going to represent every one of those individuals, and I wanted to make sure that they knew that I was going to be a voice for all. Okay? And that couldn't be possible without the help, without seeing somebody like Beto take those same steps. Second, I'm proud of being able to say that I'm a moderate Democrat because that's what I represent in the district. Our district is rural, so the Democrats need to understand, and my colleagues understand, that I am a different type of Democrat because of the district that I represent. But at the same time, we needed to know that because the people that are in power right now are the Republicans, that we need to reach across the aisle and work with them because we need them also, the reasonable, sensible Republicans that we can work with. And the worst thing that can happen is, for the Republican colleagues that I have, as soon as they start working with us, their base ends up immediately threatening them and challenging them, that they're going to challenge them on a primary. And that's not the right thing to do. And we need to continue to be able to reach across the aisle. And again, that's a page that I took from Beto, because if you recall, he received national attention when he befriended Will Hurd to be able to go from El Paso all the way to D.C. and made it a point to show that two congressmen, irrespective of what party affiliation they had, could come and work together for the betterment of Texas and for the betterment of our country. It seems D.C. has lost sight of that, and it seems that portions of Texas has lost sight of that as well. And it is time for you all to remind them who we are and what we need and what Texans expect from their public officials. Okay? Now, this is the first time that I introduced Beto, so I wanted to make sure that I got some of these points right. So, I want to make sure the data I'm about to provide to you is correct. You know, I talked about that being compassionate, caring, understanding, and passionate about public service. One of the things that he has done, and I don't think that anyone else has ever, he has repeatedly continued to take to make contact with me through text and telephone calls. And even though we may not see eye to eye on every single issue, he has taken the time to visit with me and understand, what are your constituents saying? What do I need to do? How can I change my messaging to reflect the values of your district and of Texas? And the fact that he has taken the time to do that, and not only that, not only once, but repeatedly made calls and stayed in contact, tells you a lot about the man that he is, and more importantly, how you all will benefit from having a governor that is so hands-on and knows your community and knows your district and knows how District 7 works. That hard work ethic, that endless energy, his fight to bring all Texans his message and begin dialogue is what sets this man apart. As we speak about hard work ethic, we are reminded about this Labor Day weekend that it should be a time to recognize the contributions workers have made to America's strength, prosperity, and the well-being of America. But this is also a time to reflect on the unfinished work that is needed to continue to protect American workers. All of you. Half of Texas families live in a neighborhood where child care is unavailable. 40% of workers in Texas lack paid sick time. Think about it. 75% lack paid family leave. That is why you need to vote in November. To usher in a new era in Texas where we raise the minimum wage to a livable wage. A new era where we protect the right to those who form a union in order to protect worker rights. A new period in Texas where we acknowledge and understand that small businesses are the backbone of Texas and the country, along with their employees. Lastly, if that doesn't convince you of how important this election year is, I remind you that women's right to choose is on the ballot. The right to marry whomever you choose is on the ballot. The right to vote is on the ballot. We are living in a time where democracy itself is in jeopardy from the far-right extremist views. I have two beautiful grown daughters, both public educators. ridiculous for me to be in the 21st century as a public servant to you all to still have to fight women's right to choose. It's unbelievable. That their younger brother, who we call Little Eddie, but has nothing little about him, he's like 6'3", has entered law school and has actually paid attention at a very young age. She graduated within 3 years out of UT, by the way. I'm proud of college. But he's having now to understand that now he has to be the next generation that continues to fight to protect people like his sisters and people like all of us in Texas because of certain far-right extreme views that currently think that they're in the right. And it's wrong. We need to change that, and we can only do that through your vote this November. So on that note, I introduce to you the man with a vision for a better Texas for working families. A man with endless energy and a strong work ethic. A man who has been doing the job even without the title. A man who will be a voice for all of Texas. My friend, Beto O'Rourke.
I was here in Alpine. I was with my wife. It was last year. We were about to go into the Big Bend. We were going to go float the river for a little while. We were having what we thought might be our last meal. You never know if you're going to come out of the Big Bend when you go into the Big Bend. And there was Mayor Ferguson and his family. Up here, they had just played, I think, an event not too far from the restaurant that we were in. One of the very first times I met him, we were in Marfa, Texas. And as we roll into town, there is Mariachi Santa Cruz and Mayor Ferguson welcoming us to the Trans-Pecos region. So much fierce pride in this community and in this part of Texas. And I'm so grateful that you are here again for us and welcoming us to this state. Mayor, thank you. Mariachi, thank you. Noah Zunker, who is a member of my team, we got some cheers for the Zunker family here. He's got one of these old school counters. It's not plastic, it's metal. It may have been handed down from his great-great-grandfather to count people who are at an event or at a bank. He's using that counter, he's counting every single person who comes into this event. He just showed me the counter. We're at 604 people who come out here today and Alpine. So, Liz Rogers and team, great job bringing everybody together. So glad that you're here. Let's give it up for our next Agriculture Commissioner, Susan Hayes, who's absolutely amazing. We would be so lucky, and already we are so proud of someone who exhibits every characteristic, quality, and value that we want to see from those who hold these positions of public trust. She is here right now with us, but not out of convenience, not out of political necessity, but because this is her home. And you know that she will bring Alpine and Brewster County with her to the state capitol. It's the same way that Representative Eddie Morales represents his district. He just mentioned it is the largest state house district in the largest of the lower 48. That means it's a lot of work. It's a lot of meetings, a lot of school board trustees and county commissioners and city council representatives and everyday people from every single walk of life to make sure that he is delivering for them. And I know he says this in his own way. He'll say, no me importa. I do not care whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, who you pray to, how you love, how many generations you can count yourself a Texan, or whether you just got here this week. You're my fellow human being. I'm going to make sure that I stand up and serve you, deliver for you, meet your expectations, make you proud to have this guy in office, and we are proud of Eddie Miles being in office. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to begin with the very big, important news. We are going to win this election on the night of November 8th. We're going to do this together. We're going to win. We're going to win because we are fighting for everyone to make their own decisions about their own body, their own future, and our own health care. We're going to win because we put our kids above the interests of the NRA or the gun lobby or the political polls or any other consideration. Their lives come first. We're going to win because we're going to teach our school, we're going to treat our school teachers, our counselors, our librarians with the respect and the dignity that they deserve. No more book bans, no more turning in the transgender kids' parents for child abuse, no more CRT fear-mongering in our schools, and no more forcing these teachers to work 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. Right here in this county, the average public school educator is underpaid by $17,500 a year against the average national. $17,500 a year less than not just the highest paid teacher in America, but the average teacher pay in this great country. No wonder you're working not 1, but 2 or 3 jobs in order to make ends meet. And yet, despite that, when those kids come into this classroom at the beginning of the school year, those decorations you put up, you paid for out of your own pocket. That child who's on free and reduced breakfast and lunch, and you know damn well there's no warm meal for them to go home to at the end of the day, out of your own pocket, you pay for the calories for her to burn so she can do that homework that you assigned. That kid who shows up in the same dirty t-shirt, same dirty pair of jeans, same dirty Jonas, more likely than not, who holds his head down in shame because he's embarrassed of the way that he looks, the money that his folks do not have. Out of your own pocket, over the weekend, you buy him a new set of clothes so he can hold his head high in that classroom. When we win this and when I'm your governor, we're paying every teacher in Brewster County enough to just work 1 job, and that is focusing on those kids and drawing forth their lifelong love of learning. And I'm going to make sure that you don't have to waste any time preparing not just hour after hour or day after day, but nowadays it's week after week and months after months for a high-pressure, high-stakes, standardized test that in no way effectively measures the potential in that kid or the effort that you're expending on his or her behalf. Because you have told me to do this and I'm following your lead, we are canceling the STAR test in the state of Texas going forward. And we're going to have some help in doing this because I am going to name a classroom teacher as our next TEA commissioner in the state of Texas. And so what I'm aiming to do is how we're going to make it better. We're going to win because we are fighting for those who have fought for us. Those veterans who willingly put their lives on the line for the United States of America, going all the way back to World War II, through Korea, Vietnam. Those Vietnam-era veterans, think about this, sent off to a war that this country never fully understood, came back here to Alpine not to ticker tape parades or pats on the back or thank you for your service or allow me to buy your meal at this restaurant. At best, indifference, at worst, the outright hatred from their fellow Americans, and yet, nonetheless, put their heads down, raised their families, started businesses, worked their jobs, got civically engaged, and helped to build this community up even better than it was before. And now, when generations of our own are coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq and Somalia and Yemen, and these wars half the world away that have been going on my entire adult life. And these veterans come back and they said, you know what? I was breathing in some shit that I don't know that I understand. It was medical waste, it was body parts, it was chemicals, it was toxins. And now that I'm back here in Alpine, I cannot breathe so well in my own home or the classroom or at my job. Well, that Vietnam era veteran who waited 40 years
for his exposure to Agent Orange to be treated as the presumptive condition for the cancers that claim the lives of so many with whom he served, was first in line fighting for today's veteran to get the respect and dignity, resources, and care that she deserves. We are going to have their backs. And in Texas, we're going to stand up a toxic burn pit registry to connect every veteran with the care that they need to make sure that they can get back on their feet and live to their full potential. In this great state, with a $2 trillion GDP, we will spare no expense. We will bear every single burden before us to make sure that no veteran goes unhoused, is sleeping on the side of the road, is on a park bench tonight, is underneath a bridge. That happens all too often still in this great state. We spare no expense to send them off to war. But when they come back, after they've done every single thing we've asked them to do, we need to make sure that we now fulfill our end of the bargain. I want to tell you one more thing about these extraordinary veterans. At town halls just like these, and when I served on the House Veterans Affairs Committee in Congress, they told me, when you are lucky enough to be able to get into the VA, because sometimes coming from underserved communities, it's a hundreds of mile drive, or you just don't get in at all, or they deny your claim until maybe you die. That's a phrase I've heard over and over again within the VA. Or, if you get in, you're prescribed an opiate, to which you may become addicted, and from which you may die. And you may not want any of that. There may be something that you can take or use that relieves your symptoms, that increases your appetite, that keeps your dog from barking, that allows you to sleep and makes life just a little bit more livable. But today in the state of Texas, for some reason, and God only knows, you're treated as a criminal in the eyes of the law for using that. That's why when we win, we're legalizing marijuana in the state of Texas. And because we have put so many of our own behind bars, and disproportionately it has been black and brown Texans, though all Texans of all races and creeds and ethnicities use marijuana at the same rate, only some are more likely than others to be stopped and frisked and incarcerated, and upon release, forced to check a box on every employment application form, every student loan application form, saying that they have this conviction, making it less likely that they're able to get ahead. Their options and opportunities have been narrowed and constricted. So in addition to legalizing, we're going to expunge the arrest records for anyone who is convicted for possession of a substance that is legal in most of the rest of the country already. We're going to win because we're fighting for and not against one another. If you're a Republican and you're here, I'm glad that you came. Democrats, you're welcomed as well. Independents, we're glad to have you. At this very divided moment, where we find ourselves more polarized than we've ever been before. And listen, this didn't just happen to us. There are people in power who feed off this division, who are constantly trying to scare you about those who don't love the way you do, or look the way you do, or come from the same country that your parents and grandparents came. They want you to hate, and that's where they build their power. In their Texas, it is you or it is me. In our Texas, it's going to be you and me, all of us together, working for, by, and with one another. And we're going to win, ladies and gentlemen, because we are running against arguably the worst governor in the United States of America. Let me give it to you by the numbers. It's been 10 days since Greg Abbott's so-called trigger law went into effect. 10 days now, where abortion is absolutely outlawed beginning at conception, with no exception for rape and no exception for incest. But Mr. Governor, a reporter asked at the bill signing ceremony, you realize that if there's no exception for rape and a woman who's raped should be forced to carry her rapist child? The governor said, don't worry about that. We're going to eliminate rape in the state of Texas. I don't know if you caught that one from the governor. Let me lay this on you. More rapes have been committed in Texas than any other state in this country. Our ability to bring perpetrators to justice has declined by half, like 50%. on this guy's watch. There are more than 3,000 untested rape kits at DPS Work Headquarters in Austin, Texas right now. No, he's not eliminated rape. He's made it easier for rapists to commit these crimes without justice, without accountability, without punishment in the state of Texas. Y además, in addition to all of this, we lead so much of the developed world today in the rate of maternal mortality. Adrian Billings and other extraordinary healthcare providers from these underserved communities can testify to this. When you shut down reproductive healthcare clinics in the state of Texas, as Greg Abbott has been doing over the last 7 years, not only do you foreclose a woman's opportunity to be able to seek an abortion in this state, but you also probably shut off every option at a cervical cancer screening, seeing a family planning provider, and just being able to see a doctor at all in the least insured state in America. Greg Abbott today is killing the women of Texas, and we need to know that because, as Representative Morales said, we have an incredibly important election in 2 months. Every single voter in this state must have the information to make that decision. When we win, we're going to make sure that we restore protections for these rights for the women of Texas. And when I say we, that is all of us together. And I want you to know this.
Not only is this possible, Liz Rogers knows this, not only is this possible, we've done this before against much longer odds. 50 years ago, abortion was just as illegal in Texas as it is today. But no one came from outside of this state and rode to our rescue and saved the day and made things okay for the women of Texas. In fact, it was the women of Texas who did that. Jane Roe of Roe versus Wade and her 2 attorneys, Linda Coffey, who still lives in Dallas, Texas, and Sarah Weddington from bright blue Abilene, Texas, successfully pled the case for the right to privacy, to make these very personal and painful decisions before an all-male United States Supreme Court. And their victory, the victory of Texas women in 1973, stood the test of time for all American women for nearly half a century. Here's my argument to you. If it was Texas women who won that right 50 years ago, it would be Texas women today in 2022 who win it back.
Days since this trigger law went into effect, we're approaching now 15 weeks. 15 weeks since 19 innocent children were slaughtered in their classroom at the end of the school year, right where they sat. There are 2 teachers who had already sacrificed the best years and days of their lives to connect with those kids against the already tough odds that I described to you earlier, were willing to put their lives in front of those kids, in between them and that gunman, and an 18-year-old who in the state of Texas legally purchased not 1, but 2 AR-15s and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. 2 AR-15s, a weapon originally engineered, designed, and sold to the United States military to be able to take an enemy soldier down at 500 yards, to penetrate that steel helmet and knock him down so that he could not be revived. Those kids, not at 500 yards, but at 5 feet maximum, with nothing on their head but a baseball cap, could only be recognized by their parents by the shoes that they were wearing or the DNA swab that they took. The doctor on the scene described it as liquefaction, what happens to their bodies. That high-impact, high-velocity round destroys all of the soft tissue, the arteries, the blood vessels, the organs in your body, exactly as it is intended to do on a battlefield. Nearly 15 weeks, and a governor who's called a special session to go after transgender kids. A governor who's willing to call a special session to go after critical race theory as though it were being taught in 2nd and 3rd grades in Texas public schools. A governor who calls special session after special session to weaken this very democracy to the point that we are the hardest state in the nation in which to cast a ballot or in which to register to vote, over these 15 weeks could not be bothered to call a special session and make it any less likely that my 3 kids or your grandkids will face the same fate as those children in Uvalde, or those children at Santa Fe High School in 2018, or those shoppers at Walmart in 2019, or those innocent people in Midland, Odessa the month after El Paso. 5 of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history have taken place in this state in just the last 5 years. And he has done nothing, but nothing, to make us any safer. In fact, the only thing he's done is sign a bill called permitless carry that allows anyone to carry a weapon in public now without a background check, without any vetting, without any training whatsoever. Over the last 5 years, law enforcement 38,000 times denied one of our fellow Texans the ability to have a license to carry a firearm because they said this woman, this man is just too much of a danger to themselves, to their family, to their classmates, to the people in this community. They cannot be trusted with that firearm. Now, all 38,000 of them potentially are armed and loaded on our streets, and none of us are the safer or the wiser for it, as are tens of thousands more who knew better than to ever apply for a license to carry back when we had them. Well, here's what we can do together. Listen, like many of you, I grew up in Texas. I grew up with firearms in our household. I grew up learning not only how to shoot, but the responsibility that comes with owning that gun. It's the same lessons that we've imparted on our 3 kids. It's the same thing that you're doing probably in your own household. All I ask, all you're asking, and listen, most importantly, all our kids are asking, because they don't get a vote or a voice in this election but through us, is that we find some common ground to get back to that responsible tradition. Like this: what if, at a minimum, we raise the age of purchase for an AR-15 from 18 to 21 years old? Somebody might say to me, "Hey, that sounds great, but criminals don't follow the law." And I would concede that point. Criminals don't follow the law. That's what makes them criminals in the first place. But this young man in Uvalde did not try to get that AR-15 when he was 16. He didn't try to get it when he was 17. That would have been against the law. He patiently waited for his 18th birthday. Raising the age would have purchased us 3 more years in that community for some intervention in that young man's life. Or what about a red flag law that says, look, if you already have the firearm in your possession, but you're talking about killing yourself, or shooting your wife, or taking it into school, law enforcement will now have the ability to intervene before it's too late. Again, back to that shooter in Uvalde, he was sending off such strong signals about what he intended to do before he ever did it, that his friends called him the school shooter, before he ever walked into Robb Elementary and shot a single soul. A red flag law not only could have stopped that in El Paso, that person who killed 23 people. When his AK-47, another weapon of war, came in, his mom called the Allen Police Department in North Texas. She said, "Officer, my son just ordered an AK-47. I have no idea what he wants with this." And she may have signaled some other signs of distress in this young man's life. Because we don't have a red flag law, the cop said, "Ma'am, good luck, you're on your own." He drives that weapon 650 miles, posts a manifesto online echoing Greg Abbott and Donald Trump, talking about repelling an invasion of Hispanics who are going to take over this country, walks into that Walmart and shoots everyone who looks like a Mexican or an immigrant or a Hispanic to him. We could have stopped that with a red flag law. One last one. This is what I would talk about with my Republican colleagues and Democrats alike, were I to be governor and to call that special session. Right now, if you go into a gun shop, and he's a federal licensed dealer, you have to go through a background check, and that's wonderful. If you have a violent criminal record, we're going to pick that up and deny you the ability to purchase that gun. But in Texas, because we don't have a universal background check, you are welcome to go purchase that firearm from a private seller, no questions asked, and that's okay by the law today, although that's not all right with us. I mentioned Midland, Odessa. Guy walks into a gun store, is denied the AR-15 because he can't pass the background check. So he goes and buys from a private seller the exact same weapon, turns around and uses it against the very people of Midland, Odessa, taking 8 lives on that day. A universal background check would have saved those lives. We should admit that there's nothing that we can come up with that would prevent every instance of gun violence. But we should also acknowledge that should not stop us from doing what we can to defend the Second Amendment and protect your lives of those in our lives. And if you're like me, your kids are your conscience. The people of Uvalde are our conscience right now in the state of Texas, and they're demanding justice and accountability and answers for what happened that day. They have yet to get them from our governor, and they're demanding action. They're marching in Uvalde, they're marching in Austin, Texas, they're marching to shock our conscience so that we do something right now at this defining moment of truth. Let us not be found wanting. Let us not let them down. And let us make sure that when our kids look back on this moment, 2022, after everything that had happened, they look back with pride in the way that we met this moment and how we chose to respond. That's our opportunity right now. Let us do right by these kids. The last number that I want to give you, is 7.5 years. That's how long Greg Abbott has been the governor of this state. 7.5 years he was given to fix the grid. He was warned about underlying vulnerabilities. We need to winterize it, we need to weatherize it. Mr. Governor, if the temperature drops as it did in 2011, we're not going to have the generating capacity to connect with all the customers across the state. People could die. Guy did not lift a finger. When that freeze happened last February, and we saw blackouts across the state, not for hours, not for days. For some people, they lost power and water for weeks across the state of Texas. 700 people that we know of lost their lives. In Conroe, Texas, an 11-year-old boy froze to death in his bed. His mom could not pile enough blankets on his shivering body. A 75-year-old Vietnam-era veteran, one of these guys who willingly put his life on the line for us in the 1960s and early 1970s, could no longer charge his oxygen tank inside his house. So he takes it out to his truck to charge it there, where they find him dead of hypothermia. Kids burned up in their apartments as their parents lit their furniture on fire. You don't do that for kids. You do it because you think it's the only way you're going to be able to keep your babies alive. And you lost them. And to add insult to injury, over the course of those 5 days when it was at its worst, the governor, Greg Abbott, ordered the PUC to peg the price of electricity at its maximum allowable rate. Gas traded at 200 times the going rate. Utilities went into bankruptcy proceedings. They took on billions of dollars of debt. But you know what? His best friends and his biggest financial contributors made out like bandits. $11 billion in profit was made over 5 days by energy traders and pipeline corporations across the state of Texas. And you and I were stuck literally holding the bag. Your utility bills have gone up on average $45 a month per ratepayer all across the state of Texas. When that is compounded by the $20 billion more that we're paying in property taxes under Greg Abbott, you realize he's the single greatest driver of inflation in the state of Texas today. But we have an answer to this. One, we're going to weatherize and winterize the grid. Two, we're going to connect ERCOT with the national grid so we can pull down electricity when we need it. Three, we're going to take those fees to court and get our $11 billion back and return it to the ratepayers across the state of Texas. 7.5 years, and this governor could have done something about health care. We acknowledged the mayor of Presidio earlier. I met one of his constituents who was delivered by the veterinarian because there was not a full-time doctor in that community to be able to deliver her. We hear about folks in the Trans-Vegas who drive hours, hundreds of miles in order to be able to see a provider or a doctor. This isn't right in the United States of America. This isn't right in the state of Texas. We are 51st in the nation in the ability to see a mental health care provider. What that means is that our county jail system has become the largest provider of mental health care services in the state of Texas. I kid you not, at meetings just like these, from Lufkin to Fort Worth, someone will raise their hand and say, hey, that's my brother, my sister, my mom gets arrested on purpose to be taken to the county jail because her untreated schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or clinical depression, she doesn't qualify for Medicaid, she's not wealthy enough to afford private insurance, she's shit out of luck and on the streets, and this is the only help that she will get. You look at these counties where you do not have access to a mental health care provider, and I think there is one in Brewster County right now, and you look at the levels of opioid abuse, overdose, death, and suicide, and I know we hate to use that word or talk about it, we fail to confront it or face it, we will never make it better. This is how we answer this issue. We are going to bring back $10 billion a year of our own federal income taxes in Medicaid expansion. We're going to hire more providers in communities like this one, in Presidio as well. We're going to ensure we go from 51st to #1 in mental health care access so that you're healthy enough and well enough to live to your full potential. And we're going to revive programs that used to exist, and I hope that I'll have a partner in Representative Morales here. Being in Fort Stockton not too long ago, I met a young doctor who was only able to practice medicine because his medical school tuition was paid for at the time by the state of Texas and the county of Pecos. And the condition was, you come back here and practice medicine for 6 years, and we'll pay your full ride to get that medical education. He is now in his 10th year back in Fort Stockton, married somebody from the community, raising his kids right there. For the bargain price of a medical school education, we can grow our own. So let's revive that program and spend some money on the folks here in this community. Eddie can tell you, when we look at those medical school classrooms across the state of Texas, they're full of young people from big cities and suburbs and even other states. Not represented for the most part are young people from rural Texas. We can find and answer that. This is the last thing that I want to share with you. Because, I mentioned of all the things that the governor is going to try to scare you about. We talked about he's going to scare you about transgender kids. He's going to scare you about gay people in Texas. They're proposing a don't say gay bill this next session. He's going to scare you about everything that he can find under the sun because he has no proposals, no track record, no vision on which to run. But this is the big boogeyman in the governor's playbook, and that is the border and immigration. So I'm going to close with this because it's so important, especially given where we are right now in Brewster County. We all take pride in the fact that we are a country and a state of immigrants. We know that there are some who came to this part of the world 15,000 years ago, and their descendants are still with us today. They are the original nations. They are the indigenous people. And we're grateful that they made that journey. We know that there are some whose families began this travel more than 400 years ago in bondage, against their will, forced literally to build the wealth and success of this great country, even our state capital in Austin, even though they and many of their descendants would never have the opportunity to share in that wealth and success. And we know that there are others who came of their own volition, their wars in the 19th century. To return to Ireland meant certain death because the famine was going on there at the time. This country was the one that took us in. And we've done our best not only to do well for ourselves, but to do well for everyone else. I think that's the story of every immigrant from every generation. And that holds true today for those who are making this frightening journey. 2,000 miles up the length of this continent. Imagine, because unique in the animal kingdom, we have this power of empathy. We can kind of think about what it would be like to be somebody else. What would it take for you to grab hold of your daughter's hand and to make that 2,000-mile journey? What would it take for you to send your daughter without you on that 2,000-mile journey? I don't think you're a bad parent. I don't think you're trying to steal anything from anybody here. I think you probably do it because you have no other choice but to do that. That's the only thing that would compel me to send any one of my 3 kids on a journey like this one. Day before yesterday, we learned that 8 migrants died in the Rio Grande River, just outside of Eagle Pass. A few months before that, 53 people, human beings, including kids, were found dead in the back of a trailer. It wasn't the first time this has happened in the state of Texas. Just in the Del Rio sector, just this year, 218 human beings have lost their lives. And I just want us to think about that because it's so easy, because we don't know their names, we probably will never see their faces, we don't know their stories, just to kind of write them off and just to turn the page if we even noticed that they existed in the first place. What compels you to get into that trailer and to reach down and to hold the hand of your 5-year-old daughter and bring her up with you? You're doing this because you're trying to survive. But today in this country, a country that has not rewritten its immigration laws since Ronald Reagan was the President of the United States of America, does not afford those who want to come here to work, come here to join family, come here to seek asylum or refuge, a safe, legal, orderly path in which to do so. And you know who bears the brunt? It's not just those migrants, not just those families who lost a loved one. It's members of the Border Patrol who on a daily basis risk their lives. And I mentioned those 8 deaths in Eagle Pass. You know who was in the river with those families? It was members of the Border Patrol, risking their own lives, maybe not coming back home to their kids, to their spouses. It was members of that firefighting team in Maverick County, the local sheriff's deputies, willing to do their best. On their backs, they bear the burden of this broken system. It is not the fault of Republicans or Democrats. This one, in a democracy that is of, by, and for the people, is on each and every single one of us until we make it better. So I just want to say this. They'll try to scare us. They'll try to say that we're not tough enough. They'll use these stunts like sending migrants on buses to Washington, D.C., Chicago, and New York City. Search me, but I cannot find a way in which that is making the problem better. They'll build a few miles of border wall. They'll involuntarily activate 10,000 members of the National Guard. I've met these members of the Guard in Zapata, in Del Rio, along the border. They signed up because in some cases they lived in Houston. They were there when a Guard member saved their lives during Hurricane Harvey, and they wanted to do the same for somebody else. They signed up because after 9/11, they wanted to make sure they were on the front lines for any war that this country had to fight. They signed up to be there in a time of emergency or crisis. They did not sign up for this political theater today. 8 of them have lost their lives since this involuntary activation. 4 have taken their lives, and 4 more have died under questionable circumstances. Bishop Evans was one of those Guard members who went into the Rio Grande River to try to rescue migrants and lost his life as well. These are not solutions. At best, they can be described as stunts. But I want you to remember, the person in power in the state of Texas, in the highest office in the land, who is joined by Republicans who hold every other lever of power in the state of Texas, has brought us to this moment. What we deserve going forward are solutions. And that means that we work with everyone. We don't care your partisanship, your geography, the differences between us. We've got to find some common ground on this issue. And I guarantee you, if we work on a Texas-based guest worker program, if we do something to make sure that we change the visa caps in Mexico so you're not waiting 20 years to join a family member, if your asylum request is no longer pending for 6 years, which it is today, but instead it's decided in 6 days, and if you pass, welcome to America, and if you don't, you've got to go back to the country from which you came. No ifs, ands, or buts. We're a nation of laws, and we're going to follow the law. We will be doing right by ourselves as a nation of immigrants. We'll be doing right by those members of the Border Patrol and law enforcement who are forced to be our immigration system today, and we will no longer have this as an issue. It can be scapegoated by demagogues in power who seek to vilify and demonize immigrants. I'll tell you, that guy who walked into that Walmart on the 3rd of August 2019, who came, as he later told police, to kill Mexicans, have been warned over and over again about this invasion, about these animals, about this infestation. These are all words used by those in the highest positions of public power. And the day before that shooting at Walmart, Greg Abbott sent out a message to the people of Texas. He said, we must defend ourselves, and we must take matters into our own hands. This is what happens when we fail to lead or to come up with solutions. I promise you, we win this election. We focus on those solutions. We lead from the border, from communities just like this one, and we get it right for Texas, we get it right for America, and we no longer have this as an issue that divides us or defines us in the most negative ways as it does today. We are going to do this. Listen, Alpine, I'm so grateful you came out here today. Y agradezco muchísimas gracias. Y estamos aquí para responder a sus preguntas, sus ideas, your questions, your ideas. We want to be on hand to listen to you. Cynthia Connor, who's in the black cap, has another microphone. We'll quickly take 3 or 4 questions. You raise your hand, she'll try to bring the microphone over to you.
All right, this is going to be our first question. Hi, Beth.
Hi there.
Thank you so much for coming. As a young woman in Texas, it's so scary right now, and I appreciate everything you're trying to do. So I want to ask you about any ideas about putting any funds towards our arts programs, because in Texas they are struggling so much. As a student myself, being in the arts is one of the best ways I can use to express myself. But cut after cut is being made, and laws after laws are being made to constrain our ideas, our expression, and our creativity. So I just want to ask you about your ideas of getting more funds and taking those laws away so we can express ourselves.
Right on. Let's hear it for arts education, right? Theater, music, visual arts. So important. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. And I say this as a parent of a 15, 14, and 11-year-old. Certainly I want to make sure that they can read and write and add up, right? And that they do better than I ever did in math class. I was in remedial algebra for like 3 years in high school. Okay? I wanted to do well. But what I have seen for all of them that are in music classes, what I have seen open up for them through their ability not just to play music, learn an instrument, develop this discipline, but to work literally in concert and in harmony with other people. The ability to see the other person in your class not as your enemy or your competitor, but as your collaborator, somebody with whom you find consensus and do something together that you'd never be able to do individually. That is so powerful. And I feel so lucky that we have that in El Paso in the school district. But to your question, I've traveled to every one of the counties of Texas. I remember being in Midland, Odessa, and someone stood up at a meeting just like this, and she said, I'm an itinerant arts educator. I travel to the districts that cannot afford a full-time arts program in their independent school district. So I go in 1 day a week, that entire town, whether you're in elementary, middle, or high school, you get one teacher for so many hours, and then that person's gone. And they come back another week if the grant is renewed, right? So this has got to be something that you just count on, no matter where you live. How are we going to pay for this? That's the next question that comes in here. I mentioned that we are a $2 trillion GDP. Representative Morales works on a $250 billion biennial budget. We have the wealth and resources in the state of Texas. We just need to make sure that we apply them where they are needed. But I want to make sure that I make this point clear. I don't want you or your folks or your grandparents to have to pay more in property taxes in order to extend arts education. This is the way that we'll do it. Right now, the state of Texas pays 40% for the cost of public ed in the state. It used to be, in the good old days, 50%. For some reason, as the demographics of the state changed, the state of Texas chose to spend less and less and force local property taxpayers to spend more and more. I'm going to work with Republicans and Democrats to get that ratio back up to 50% so we can lower your property taxes while still injecting more money into your districts for arts education. When we do that and complement it with adding that $10 billion in Medicaid expansion money, we're going to lower those property taxes even more while ensuring that you get an even better education. So thanks for raising this today. Thanks for elevating the arts. So important. How are you?
All right, I'm looking for hands
great question.
So I'm going to work with Susan on this one because she's heard it just as much as I have. We're here in one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth that has so much extraordinary natural resource wealth. We've been up in the Panhandle together that has much the same. And we keep running into this problem of the permanent university fund, which for those who don't know means that we extract all the wealth from Texas and all of that flows into just two universities, the University of Texas and Texas A&M. Listen, we love both of those institutions. We do not begrudge them their success, but they're the two most highly endowed public institutions in the United States of America. Now, where is that money for Sol Ross? Where is that money for Texas State? Where is that money for our historically black colleges and universities across Texas? It's there, but we just got to ensure that we share it equitably in the state of Texas to defray the cost of higher education, to make it a little bit easier for anybody coming from any part of the state, including Brewster or Presidio, to pursue their true potential. At a minimum, I want to make sure that the first 2 years of higher education are available to every Texan without taking on a single dime of debt. I want to make sure that in underserved communities we invest in that Grow Your Own program for in-demand professions like nursing, doctors, mental health care, teaching even. But I also want to say this, Eddie Morales mentioned this earlier, there are many for whom college is not their choice or won't be their option. But I want to make sure there are opportunities as well. If you want to enter a 5-year apprentice program to become an electrician, for example, I want to make sure it's easier to join the IBE program and earn while you learn. Graduate becoming German or German. The demand for welders, outfitters, steel workers, these very high skill, high value jobs that do not require a college education is through the roof right now. And yet we're unable to find people to fill those jobs very often because they cannot afford the tuition or the expense to get that welder certification or any of these other trades or disciplines. So elevating the role of unions, the ability to organize, and options for every young person, regardless of the path they want to choose, that makes us a better state. Thank you very much for the question.
Hi, Deborah. We are both fellow El Paso. And also I'm a veteran as well as a former vice president of the Army of El Paso. My first base as a veteran, we have a very crazy system here in El Paso in reference to the veterans, but we don't have a veterans hospital. We have a clinic center. But we can go all the way down to Berkeley or somewhere else far out in the distance, and I'm sure that in this area we don't have that either. We've been trying to get this veterans hospital for years. I think in El Paso for years. I'm curious when we're going to try to do something for the veterans, as well as when we get a system, get really good qualified doctors who are not at the end of their journey as far as a doctor, and they're really to give us what we really truly understand.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you for your service. And there's no better way for us to thank you than through our actions. And so, we were in Eagle Pass in Del Rio. I mentioned that yesterday. And listening to veterans there, they got to travel to a clinic in Laredo. Maybe they can get into, maybe they don't. Maybe they go to Audie Murphy in San Antonio. Maybe someone will make the trek all the way to El Paso, Texas. That's really going out of your way. But even if you get to El Paso, you're there at a clinic and not at a full service hospital. El Paso also has had challenges in wait times for behavioral health. In fact, we have the longest wait times in the nation to see a behavioral health provider. 148 out of 148 is something that together we turned around working with the veterans community in El Paso. As you probably know, we just stood up a full-service behavioral health clinic on the UNC campus. So it is getting better. But I agree with you.
We want to make sure we have full service hospitals for veterans within easy striking or driving or ideally walking distance. And if we can't do that, we as Texas need to step up and fill the gap. That means we use our county hospitals, our clinics, even private providers. And I have yet to meet the private provider when asked, if you say, hey, you have an opportunity right now to help these women and men who put their lives on the line for this country. They're looking at an 8-month wait to get into a full-service hospital right now. Would you see them right now and say, yes, if you will clear the paperwork hoops out of my way, you get rid of the bureaucracy. I don't care about getting a dime off these folks who serve, but I just want to make sure that I'm legally able to do that. I want to make sure we connect that there. We were able to do some of that in the city of El Paso as well. So with the Texas Veterans Commission, I will work with the VA. I'll work with all stakeholders to make sure that we elevate this as a priority. And if we need to use state resources to complement federal resources, so be it. Let's get it done. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your service. Appreciate it.
Same here, and I'm going to do 2 more questions straight.
Hi, Beto. I hope you're feeling better. You look strong.
Thank you, Ryan.
We had a gun show here this weekend at our university, and I can't understand for why. To go to your gun law advocacy, I don't see why that's happening on the university campus.
Because I don't have much that I can add to this, except to say again, I want to make sure that we honor our traditions in Texas, which include gun ownership, but responsible gun ownership. Making it easier to take guns on campuses, for example, or to walk around with guns when you have not been vetted with a background check, or guns or any kind of training. I remember there was a Vietnam era veteran who called me over to his house in El Paso after I made that comment about AR-15s and AK-47s after those 23 people were slaughtered in El Paso. And this Vietnam era veteran said, listen, Bethel, I disagree with you. I have a bunch of AR-15s and AK-47s in my home, and I'm never going to give them up. I use them responsibly, I keep them locked up, nobody can get their hands on them. But he said, you know what concerns me even more than that is this permitless carry bill, because he's also a firearms instructor. And it used to be in the licensed carry program in Texas, in addition to going through the background check, you had to have some training to develop proficiency in that firearm you were going to carry around. He said folks would come in who had no idea which end of the gun the bullet came out. And he said those folks are going to be out on our streets now. That's what that really worries me today. So let's get back to common sense. And listen, that means that nobody's going to get everything that they want. If we allow the perfect to become the enemy of the good, we'll never get anything. But those 3 ideas that I just surfaced, raising the age to 21, universal background check, red flag law, I've listened to so many gun owners, non-gun owners, Republicans, Democrats across the state of Texas. On that much, we're going to be able to agree. So thank you for reminding us of that. Appreciate it.
And this is going to be our last question.
How do you plan on supporting the LGBTQ plus Texas?
So that analysis. So quick indulgence for a personal story, to admit my guilt. Maybe like many people here, I kind of thought that progress was inevitable in this country, that history moved in this straight line, that a victory won was accomplished and we move on to the next fight. Never could imagine, even though there were all the warning signs in the world just a few years ago, that we now live in a state where abortion is outlawed with no exception for rape or incest. That failure to imagine what they would do once they held power cost us the protections and freedoms of millions of Texas women. Well, we know that in Justice Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion to the Dobbs decision, which overturns Roe versus Wade, that he says next on the chopping block is your right to contraception. Following that is same-sex intimacy, which means reviving the sodomy laws in the state of Texas. And following that will be marriage equality, the ability to marry the person of your choice. Well, guess which state, if Greg Abbott is reelected, is going to take the lead in removing protections for these basic constitutional and I would argue human rights? It will be the state of Texas. But if we are to prevent it means more than just winning this election. Because another illusion that I was disabused of recently is this idea that you can take a break and rest, and that you win a victory and the fight is over for a while. The fight is never going to be over until we draw our last dying breath. That can be depressing for some people, or it can be liberating for some people. I just want us to go in eyes wide open. For the last 49 years, the other side never took a break. They never paused. They never took their eye off the ball. They were working on getting judges appointed at the lowest levels to the highest levels. This that you have today in America, and nowhere more so than the state of Texas, is the fruition of that strategy over the last half century. While we were asleep, they were fighting this battle day in and day out. I say we, I'll say I. I know many of you were in the trenches doing the right thing at the right time. So I'm grateful to you. I just want to tell you, I'm with you right now, fully awake to what we face. So look, in Texas, though it is not all right, and it is not okay by me, it is perfectly legal to fire somebody because they're gay, or to refuse to hire them for the same reason. Though it's not okay, you can deny adoption to a same-sex couple in the state of Texas, even though we have 32,000 kids in the foster care system, the worst one in America. 100 children lost their lives in that system over the last year and a half. But you can be too gay in the state of Texas to bring one of those kids into your loving home. So not only are we going to play defense and veto the bad stuff coming down the pipe, but we've got to make sure that we aggressively stand up and fight for one another. So I want you to know that I have your back and I have the back of every single person, regardless of the differences between us. Last thing that I want to say, I cannot believe, and I know this is the last time, I cannot believe I did not get a question about trains in Alpine, Texas. So let me just tell you, on behalf of Susan Hayes, we are going to work together on this issue. I know that you're 100 miles from the nearest airport. I know a lot of communities in Texas that trains are not a frivolous thing that you would like to join and be a part of. It is something that you literally depend on to connect your community, what you build, what you make, who you are with the rest of the outside world. Right now, Texas spends 1% of its entire budget on trains and public transportation. There's $8 billion sitting in the TxDOT bank account right now, not being spent on a single thing. Were I governor and working with Susan Hayes as Ag Commissioner, what if we put that money into the Presidio, Okinaga crossing and bring these trains back in through these communities? What if we expand rail access throughout the Trans-Pecos and the rest of the state of Texas? What if we make it easier to get from point A to point B without having to get into an automobile in the first place? Might be pretty nice. So we're going to work on this together. I know that this is an important issue to outline. I want you to know that it's on my radar as well. Where's Cynthia Connell, who's our Director of Operations? Escobar? Okay, I want to say thank you, Alpine, for helping us out. We'd love you to sign up and join us as a volunteer to knock on doors. Muchísimas gracias. Les agradezco y nos vemos la próxima vez. Thank you very much.
Y'all would like to stay and take a picture, say hi. We're going to start a line and we're going to meet up on the stage. So again, if you'd like to stay, take a picture, say hi, please stand up to my left of the stage. Thank you.